Hey, good morning, crime fighters and true crime junkies. This is Derek Judd, the Cowboy Criminologist with Cowboy Criminology, coming at you on this wonderful Thursday. I do apologize. I was trying to get some videos out to y'all at the beginning of the week. Unfortunately, I live in a part of the country that's been ravaged by wildfires, and 60 to 70 mile an hour sustained winds have not been helping that. And so, unfortunately, where I live is pretty close. We had standbys to evacuate, standing in multiple counties around the area. And in this part of the country, when it's really dry, it doesn't take anything to make a wildfire spread. And when you've got shifting winds blowing 60, 70 mile an hour sustained, it was pretty scary. Fortunately, the last couple of days, we had a cold front move in. The high's only been in the 40s, and today we got some snow. So right now we're experiencing the second largest wildfire in the state's history. And so y'all just, all the families that have been affected by these wildfires and all the first responders out there dealing with that, if y'all just keep them in your prayers, I know it'd be greatly appreciated by them. So, I had 28 new subscribers to the channel, which is awesome, which is terrific. So to you new subscribers, thank y'all so much. And some of the comments were really interesting, and I want to read a couple of those. The first one comes from Angry R. It says, his tattoos say all about him. And I did mention in the last video that the tattoos were going to be a factor, and I'm going to do more of a deep dive into that shortly. Lynn Rhodes left a comment 3 days ago, and the comment basically says that he's been able to worm his way out of these situations before, and Lynn, I think you're exactly right. And so what I want to talk to y'all today about is something I call the Casey Anthony effect. And the Casey Anthony effect, for those of you who remember the Casey Anthony trial in the early 2000s, she was the young Florida mom who her 2-year-old disappeared under mysterious circumstances, but it wasn't until a family member reported that she hadn't seen the child in several weeks, and then there were several different reports about Kaylee had been kidnapped by a nanny, and it set off a media firestorm. And of course, you got to remember, this is also during the infancy of social media, and so social media was relatively new. And it's interesting to think that the Casey Anthony trial was really the first. You've heard of trial by public opinion. Well, her trial was really the first one by social media. And over the weekend, I watched a series called Death in the Dorms, which is about college students who get murdered on college campuses or in college housing adjacent to college campuses. And you think about how close some of these cases never come to getting solved. And of course, in the Kaylee Anthony case, the little girl who ended up dead, nobody's been held accountable for her murder. And I think one of the biggest problems during this trial, and it's a problem. It's a problem in law enforcement. It's an over reliance on forensics. It's an over reliance on technology. We call that the CSI effect. Of course, if you think back to the early 2000s, CSI Las Vegas, CSI New York, they were taking over. And in every episode, there's always small circumstantial evidence that provides the direct evidence to link the bad guy to the crime, and everything turns out just just wonderful. There's always a conviction, all these things. And unfortunately, the criminal justice system likes to say that jurors and people with just a common interest in criminology or the criminal justice system are affected by that. But the Casey Anthony case really kind of shows how a prosecutor relied so much on the forensics and everything, even though it was questionable, even by the investigators, about whether they were able to prove a murder happened. And so she was charged with multiple felonies, and the only thing she was actually convicted of were 4 misdemeanor false report to police officer, abuse of emergency services. And 2 of those charges were later dropped. So she's only ever been convicted of 2 felonies. And if you're looking for a problem with this case, and there are so many, it's that in the end, nobody was held accountable for Caylee Anthony's death. And watching these shows, the reason I bring up, if you think I'm being long-winded and I'm not getting to the point, I promise you, I'm about to give you a nut for your trail mix. Just bear with me. So in one of the cases, a young lady named Jenna Burley was murdered in the home of an acquaintance, and she was carried out of the apartment in a storage tote. And if you've been following my channel, you know that there was a woman found in a storage tote in Arkansas last week. She has been identified, and unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot, except that the chief of police, a local chief of police who knows her, said that it's a shame because she was really getting her life back on track. So that's heartbreaking right there. But when the prosecutors were putting the case together, it was largely circumstantial, and the prosecuting attorney did a fantastic job laying everything out. But even by his own admission, he was like, this case is largely circumstantial. And he had his doubts until he was able to find a direct connection, because really all he had was a storage bin being moved out of the suspect's home, carried by 2 people, one being the suspect and the other one, I believe, was a family member. And that storage container ended up being placed on a relative's property several miles away. And so, yeah, that's circumstantial, and yeah, you can make the leap. It's easy to make the leap and say, oh yeah, he had to have done this, he had to have moved that stuff out. But it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove. And those things can be worlds apart, just like in the Caylee Anthony case, okay? I think we all have a pretty rough idea about what happened. It's everything seems pretty consistent. Unfortunately, when bodies decompose, we tend to lose evidence. Like I said, I'm building to something, so just bear with me. And but something really neat that came out of that was Jenna had started a pet project, and the pet project was she put out blessing bags, and they were just backpacks, gently used, that were filled with canned goods and other comfort items, just to help people in need. And so it's always wonderful when families can take the most horrific thing in their life and use that one thing that a loved one was passionate about, really cared about, and kind of continue that legacy. And I'm going to put a link to Jenna's blessing bags in the bottom of in the description, so you can take a look at that. But the case was solved when DNA was found. The suspect's DNA was found under Jenna's fingernails, and they were able to to provide a positive, consistent link. Now, the defense tried to raise another scenario where, yes, the defendant actually witnessed the murder, but it wasn't done by him. It was done by his roommate. Fortunately, the forensic evidence shot that argument just completely out of the sky, shut it down completely. And he was ultimately convicted and sentenced. Had that DNA not been recovered from under Jenna's fingernails, who knows what could have happened. And the other case that came out, and this one is a little more tragic. And I'm looking up the young lady's name, because what happened out of this is is nothing short of inspiring. You talk about taking something horrific and turning it into something wonderful. So Latasha Norman, she was a Jackson State University student who was murdered by an ex-boyfriend. And it took so long for her body to be recovered that his murder conviction in his original trial was overturned on appeal, and he was granted a new trial. Basically, the long and short of it was the forensics had deteriorated to the point that murder couldn't be proved, and because a lower level offense was never allowed for the jury to be considered, that resulted in a new trial. And it had been, I think, 7 years from the time of her death to the time of the original trial. And the family didn't want to go through another trial again, which I totally get that. Trials are taxing on everybody involved, and loved ones especially. They have to sit there. They have to hear investigators and forensic scientists talk about what happened, talk about what they believe their loved ones' last moments on earth were like. And that's a horrible thing to have to listen to. And that's before you get to pictures and videos and diagrams and witness testimony, all of these things. But I'm going to put a link to Jackson State University, the Latasha Norman Center for Counseling Services. And they have a plaque telling Latasha's story. But what impresses me the most about this is that colleges and universities love to bury their head in the sand about a wide variety of issues, because if it's something bad, it happens out there. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen to us. But Jackson State University seemed to have the foresight to set up a counseling services center, and it seems to have grown from just helping those experiencing domestic violence, and it seems to have grown into more of a broader reach, offering more and more assistance. But the fact that the college them doing this actually had a threefold effect. One, it said, we understand domestic violence is happening. Two, it said, we don't condone domestic violence, and we don't want you to experience domestic violence. And three, it gave people who are experienced domestic violence, it gave them the ability to come into a place and speak with counselors and learn about their options. And a lot of times in domestic violence, a lot of the reason that people don't want to come forward is because they don't want law enforcement involved. Whether it's retaliation, they don't want the person to get in trouble, they just want the abuse to stop. Literally put in whatever your reasoning is fill in the blank. But the fact that Jackson State University had the foresight to do that is just awesome. And I'm gonna put a link to that if you wanna read more about that. But in Latasha's case, like I said, the murder conviction was overturned because a lesser charge was never brought before the jury, and so there was some discrepancy, some worry that perhaps a lesser charge would have been more appropriate. The family didn't want to go through a trial again, so they told the prosecution to offer the suspect 40 years, and he took it. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that says a lot about his guilt. That says a lot about his state of mind. Mississippi's a capital murder state, so you have to kind of balance that. Is it worth a shot at getting out as opposed to being convicted again? And who knows? It's the criminal justice system is very unique in the fact that, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. People always warn you about dying on a particular hill, but this is one I'm pretty comfortable fighting on, and that's that you've got to take every case in the criminal justice system on its own merits, because every case is individual. Now, that doesn't mean you discard precedent, and that doesn't mean you don't play the numbers when we're talking about profiling and stuff, which is going to be coming up here in just a minute. But it does mean that you still have to suspend belief and really drill down to the bedrock of what the case is, okay? And so, no surprise to anybody, at least I hope it's not a surprise, Don Steven McDougals has been charged with capital murder here in the state of Texas. But anyhow, McDougals been charged with capital murder. Now, in the state of Texas, capital murder requires a murder and then some sort of aggravating circumstance. And that's generally a murder that happens in the course of committing another felony. So in this case, we have kidnapping and we have murder. Those two have been, well, we have kidnapping, at least. At least that's what the prosecution believes they can prove at this time. So they can prove prosecution. Of course, they can prove murder because Audrii didn't tie herself to a rock and chuck herself into the Trinity River. Okay. We can sit here and we can speculate all day long about what a defense might try to cook up. But the nice thing is we kind of have, we have a paper trail with him of sorts, a roadmap that kind of shows us what we're dealing with when we're talking about McDougals. And I'd been saying that I wasn't sure how he was charged with enticement of a child, but wasn't put on the sex offender registry. Well, you'll hear in a minute that there was a plea bargain in place, and part of that plea bargain was not having to register as a sex offender. Angry R had mentioned the swastika tattoos, and it says a lot about him. It does, but we're gonna watch a couple of videos, and I'm gonna talk about something that I read in the New York Post. But while he may have been able to somewhat subvert inmates finding out what he was in prison for originally and managed to hook up with a white supremacist gang, that's not going to be the case this next go round. And it's not going to be the case because now everybody knows he's suspected in killing this young girl, and he has a propensity for attempting to sexually assault young females. And so this first video we're going to watch This comes from ABC 7, and if you haven't watched it, it's worth a watch. And if you have watched it, it's worth kind of going over again. So we'll go ahead and start this.
Also tonight, we're taking a deeper look at the suspect's past.
A woman who was targeted by McDougall as a child is bravely coming forward to share her story tonight. She is one of several people who police say experienced violence from McDougall.
ABC 13 anchor Elisa Rivas is live to walk us through the timeline here, Elisa.
Charlie, Eric, there are so many layers to this story, starting with the case prosecutors are building now. And it's hard to fathom. Don Steven McDougals was a family friend, a person even trusted to live in a camper behind the home Audrii shared with her father's side of the family. Despite his disturbing history, court documents don't get into what Audrii had to endure in her final moments, but they include this haunting detail. Her body was found in the water, weighted down with a rock.
Okay, so right there, for capital murder, involves special circumstances, special victims. In this case, they're using part of 19.03 of the Texas Penal Code, where it's the murder of somebody that's older than 10 but under the age of 15. Kidnapping can be established. He was supposed to take her to the bus stop. She never made it. She never made it to school. There's no record of her being at school. He was the last one to see her. She ends up, like I said, with a rock tied around her waist to weigh her down in the water, and then she's got this rope wrapped around her, and the rope is similar in appearance to rope that was seen in the suspect's vehicle. I'm a little confused about how that happened. This says that the rope was seen in a vehicle on a prior traffic stop. That's good evidence. That's good evidence to have. But the big problem is going to be, how popular is that rope? How many places in the area sells it? So it'll probably come down to an analysis of the rope as belonging together.
Allegedly used was also said to be found in his SUV. McDougall's criminal history goes back more than 2 decades. Just last summer, police say he stabbed a man he did not know who was helping him jump a car battery. And tonight we are hearing also from one of McDougall's old co-workers who says McDougall attacked him when he threw him out.
Okay, so right there, we're going to stop that. So it's saying that a report came out that he tried to stab a man who tried to help him jumpstart a car. There's a lot of impulse control, and impulse control is not really anything new or unexpected when you're dealing with violent offenders. All right, sorry. Having some issues. I messed with the camera settings on my camera yesterday, and rednecks and technology. We're just, destined for tragedy. But anyway, so this type of impulse control is exactly what I'd expect to see in somebody like this. And in the next portion of this story, a lot of things are going to come together. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
14 years ago.
I opened the door up and told him he needed to leave, and he come at me with the knife, and I had my shotgun, and I hit him in the face with it and shut the door on him. I had no idea he was that kind of person.
McDougall was reportedly sentenced to 4 years in prison for that incident. Long before the violent attacks against adults, McDougall also pleaded guilty to enticing a child in Brazoria County back in 2007.
Okay, so it said long before his attacks on adults, he showed a propensity for violence against children. A lot of times in child offenders, a lot of what you're going to see has to do with the fact that they are inadequate types and they have poor impulse control. There's a lot of things. They have this image of themselves that they can't live up to, and if they're ever challenged about that, they're going to react violently. But their attacks are very poor planned, and so let's see what happened in Brazoria County.
The young victim told police he crawled into bed with her and tried to remove her pants. He did not have to register as a sex offender as part of the plea. The victim is in her 20s now, and Audrii's murder is hitting her hard. ABC 13's Luke Jones is the only reporter to talk with her about this and is live now with her story. Luke.
And you know, Elisa, she says what happened to Audrii could have easily happened to her. I mean, total shock when she saw Don McDougals' face pop up in online posts. And tonight she says she wants to be Audrii's voice and a voice for other children in similar situations.
I'll never forget his face after that.
Carissa Davis would like nothing more than to forget Don McDougals' face.
I know he's a nasty man.
And what he did to her one night in 2007 when she was 10 years old. She was at her uncle's Brazoria County house for a family gathering. McDougals' sisters were family friends.
And he came into the room that me and my cousin were sleeping in.
Davis says
McDougals' sisters were family friends. I think it's I think it's kind of odd that we're not hearing a whole lot about any relationships with adult females that aren't directly related to him. And maybe we'll get some more information. Like I said, here's the thing about criminal investigative analysis. It's only as good, it's only as accurate, and it's only as reliable as the information you get. Now, we're taking snippets here and there, and we're trying to build something. But somebody like this, I would not expect to see them having close, intimate relationships with adult women. If they did, I would expect there to be a significant gap in age, 10 to 15 years. I would also expect to see a very low level of mental and emotional maturity in the adult women that he would choose to engage in. I wouldn't be surprised to find out about domestic violence or anything like that. This is somebody who he gets an idea in his head and he acts on it. So let's find out what else Carissa has to say.
McDougall yanked her cousin from their bed, then got into bed with her.
Tried to take down my pants, and I immediately jumped up at that moment. I remember looking at him and saying, "Do you know how old I am?"
Davis raced for the door with McDougall in tow.
He grabbed me, and when he did, I just swung my arm and I hit him.
But now that he's been charged with Audrii Cunningham's murder, she can't help but wonder what would have happened had she not been able to fight back.
So, as a 10-year-old, Carissa was on point. As soon as she was grabbed, she did everything she could to get herself out of that situation. When he followed her, he tried to grab her. She turned around. She swung at him. She fought. And McDougall was not expecting a victim to fight back. And we'll get to that a little bit more here in just a few minutes. But this is somebody who reacts poorly when people challenge him. And his lack of impulse control and his inability to really think out a plan is kind of what has set him up to be a very unsuccessful criminal and most likely an unsuccessful adult.
He was still asleep. I mean, my uncle's backyard was woods. I mean, it could have been me.
McDougall pleaded guilty to enticing a child and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but got credit for almost 1.5 years served. Notably, he wasn't required to register as a sex offender and went on to face numerous other charges.
I think Brazoria County definitely failed me and failed Audrii, and possibly more.
Yeah, so, you know, when I was going through my academics and everything and going through my classes, qualified immunity for police officers was a hot button issue, and I tried to stay out of it, and unfortunately, I got goaded into participation by some of my professors, and I think they kind of wished that they maybe hadn't at that point, because the argument was, take away qualified immunity for police officers, people who have to make decisions in the moment, and take that away from them, and then they'll think harder about their actions. Okay. Y'all realize that there is no immunity, or there's immunity for prosecutors, for judges, for parole boards. And I want you to think about this. If it were possible to go back and hold Brazoria County responsible for not putting McDougall on a sex offender registration, because they'd have no qualified immunity and they would be held directly responsible for that, you think they might have charged him more aggressively? I do. And I think about cases like that, and it's hard to know, it's hard to understand. But my argument was, you're going to take away immunity for people doing a job who have a split second to make a decision, but you're going to uphold immunity for people who get to sit there for months or even years and pick apart that decision ad nauseum. And then whatever decision you make regarding that, you're not held accountable for. And I specifically call out pardons and parole boards, because there are some people, you just sit there and you shake your head and you're like, how did this person get released? How is it even possible this person got released? And the answer is always like, well, we have a matrix, and we looked at the matrix and they met all the criteria. We couldn't do anything. Really? You could have talked to a correctional officer, said, no, don't let this guy out. You could have reviewed their criminal history and said, don't let this guy out. You could listen to any number of experts who will tell you that this person is a threat. And so, not trying to get too high up on a soapbox there, but when you're talking about qualified immunity and who should and should not benefit, you really gotta be careful, because you can disrupt the justice system very, very quickly. Okay. So now, I want you to take a look at this next video, and this kind of plays into what I was saying about his poor impulse control. But he's got this great self-image of himself. He's got this tough guy image, this tough guy mentality that he's built for himself. But I want to take a look at this video. This comes from the New York Post, and this is talking about McDougall being arraigned in Polk County, I believe is where Livingston is.
We got Steve McDougall, Don McDougall. We're going to get him out to get arraigned. Steve, come on.
Yeah, okay.
JP wants to talk to you. Where's your clothes? Hold on.
I ain't got no clothes.
Well, put your smock on for now. Well, come on out here. Well, no, man. Come on, man. Don't disrespect me like that. All right, well,
Okay, so they're getting him out of his cell.
Wrap up in the blanket.
Let me set this video up for you. They're getting him out of his cell to go talk to the justice of the peace, and this is called bond hearings and arraignments happen in rapid succession, but they're two different things. A bond hearing is basically, depending on how the JP does it, the arraignment is basically, I'm going to tell you what you're charged with. This is what your bond is going to be. Do you want an attorney? Things like let's see. Let me take that back. They read you your rights, they explain the charges to you, they ask if there's any questions, and then they move into discussing bond. In Texas, capital murder, there is no bond on that. But the deputy in this case is going to his cell, and he's going to bring him out to talk to the JP. As a jail administrator, I've had to do this before, and I'm going to tell you what I see in this behavior and why it concerns me.
Come on. Steve, come on. I'll ring you real quick. Come on. Huh? Well, you got to get up and sign some paperwork. Come on. Come on. Wrap up for me. Appreciate you.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. And I want to explain something right here. You might have noticed in his booking photo, he was wearing what looked like an X-ray apron or something like that. What that is, it's a heavy quilted vest that goes from the shoulders and it covers down to the knees. It's very thick. It's kind of like the similar material to like a furniture moving blanket. Very, very thick. And the reason that's given, it's called a suicide prevention vest, suicide smock. Colloquially, never mind. In criminal justice jargon, we call it a bam bam suit for obvious reasons. But it's designed because it can't be torn, allegedly can't be torn, very difficult to be torn, and it can't be manipulated to become a ligature around somebody's neck. And the purpose of that is to prevent somebody from committing suicide. And in serious cases like this, especially crimes against children, that's more of a suicide prevention protocol. And that could also be based on things that he said during his intake, that he had suicidal ideation in the past. He's suicidal right now. Facing the charges that he's facing. Yeah, I can imagine you are. All right, so let's see what Steve's up to.
All right, Mr. McDougall, I'm Judge Richardson. I'm going to read your rights, and we're going to talk about your charge today. You have the right to remain silent, not make any statement at all, and know that any statement that you make can and will be used against you at trial in court. You have the right to have an attorney present to advise her.
Okay, so he says right there he's not signing any paper.
You do have the right to have an attorney present to advise her.
When I see this kind of behavior, first off, it's that this guy's not unfamiliar with the criminal justice system. He knows what's going on. He knows what time it is. He's done it before. But he also has a knowledge of the system. And he's trying to test the waters, I think, to see what he can kind of get away with. And I think he's trying to present himself in a very particular way that's going to raise questions about his mental stability, and not that he's going to go with an insanity plea, because in cases like this, it's the insanity defense is used like 1% of the time, and it's successful in that 1% about 3% of the time. If I remember the statistics correctly, it's it's the criminal justice equivalent of the Hail Mary play in football. But now they got him all wrapped up, and he's going to go talk to the JP.
And you're trying to be accused of a felony. Do you understand your rights, Mr. McDougall? Yep. Okay. Do you want a court-appointed attorney, or you going to hire your own?
Nope.
Which one?
I'll be an attorney.
You're going to hire your own?
Yep.
Okay. All right. All I need you to do is sign right here for me. Your charge is capital murder, and it's a no bond.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says he's going to hire his own attorney. Now, there's a demeanor to career criminals where you also see it in people who have an overinflated sense of entitlement when they get arrested. they have this idea that this is all a big joke. It's all a big game. Nothing, you can't do anything to me. Nothing's going to stick, blah, 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 blah. McDougall is not new to the criminal justice system. And a matter of fact, he's probably reciting his rights backward in his mind because he's probably heard them so many times. But what surprised me here is that he didn't go for a court-appointed defense attorney, and that he said that he'd get his own. Given his living situation and everything, I don't know where he's going to get the help from. It doesn't really say anything about what kind of job he had or anything like that. So I'm a little curious who he's going to get to represent him. The New York Post shows that he has ties to an Aryan Brotherhood affiliation in the Texas prison system. And I can't imagine that that if he has a GoFundMe page, it's doing particularly well right now. So that's kind of interesting. But in a capital murder case, going with a public defender, it for him might actually be a better strategy, because the court is going to make sure that the public defender is somebody who has experience dealing with capital murder cases, severe cases like this. It's not going to be handed to somebody, straight out of law school trying to pay off student loan debt by working or trying to get student loan debt forgiven by working in the public defender's office. But this is going to be given to somebody who actually has this level of expertise, and that could be a particular lawyer or law firm being appointed to look over his case and represent him. It doesn't necessarily mean that a public defender is going to be used. It's just going to be a lawyer appointed by the court. And if the lawyer appoints, or if the court appoints the attorney, it's going to be an attorney who has experience navigating these waters, and that'll help prevent mistrials in the future. What I see from here, from listening to him talk, from how he kind of carries himself, this is kind of what I see coming down the pipe. I see multiple changes of counsel, because he's going to argue that they're not effective, they're not representing his interests, whatever the case may be. And Sarah Boone, the suitcase murderer, she seems to be doing that whole thing. Like, she knows it's a stall tactic. She's trying to drag this whole thing out as long as she can. Now, I think McDougall has enough experience and enough knowledge from what he's learned inside prison, and please understand that just because somebody is inside prison, do not misunderstand their ability to soak up legal concepts like a sponge. And as a matter of fact, they actually have inmates in prison who are called writ writers, and these are usually highly educated, respected inmates who have an understanding of the law, who help other inmates with their legal matters. They're not a paralegal, they're not an attorney, but every once in a while you can find some of those writ writers, and they can make a case. So what I see happening here is, like I said, a couple changes of counsel, and I see this happening, and I'll kind of set this up for you. He has this idea that nothing is going to stick to him. Yeah, you've got this case, and yeah, it doesn't look good for me, but that doesn't mean you've proved that I've done anything. So I will think that the further this goes, and it could be one or two counsels being changed out. The other thing I see happening is the court coming down on him saying, no more stall tactics. If you can't show cause for counsel to be removed, we're moving forward. And in that case, he's going to act in interests that are going to make it hard for his counsel to represent him. He's going to go against their legal advice. He's going to say things to them, make threats to them, or implicate them in something that needs to be investigated, which causes them to be removed. And it just starts this whole thing. It's a game. It's a tactic. And unfortunately, it's been used very well. Do I think McDougall has the capacity to act in his own attorney? No, I don't. And I don't really see him working that out as an option. The other thing is I don't see him taking a plea agreement. And let me explain. He's facing capital murder charges in a death penalty state. So if he goes to death row, it's just a matter of when he's going to die. Now, with the white supremacy tattoos on him, he's already kind of marked himself. But as if being a white supremacist in prison was not kind of testing fate enough, as it were, now it's known. Now it's known what he was in prison for in the past. Now it's known that he has a preferential age for young girls. And I think, the physical similarities between Chris and Audrii kind of speak for themselves. And I'm very comfortable saying that he has a type and he is a preferential offender. I don't doubt that, not one bit. But he's got nothing to lose because he's got nothing but time. If he sits on death row, it's just a matter of time before he's put to death. But if he's thrown in with the general prison population, well, any gang that he's affiliated with, anybody who had his back in the past, those ties are severed. He is completely on his own, and it's pretty much open season. I think there's going to be a target on him. I think people are just going to be, or the inmates in the prison are going to be looking for a way or a reason to get to him. And so in his mind, he's got nothing to lose. So I think he's going to pull out all the stops. I think he's going to try and manipulate things as much as he's able to do. But I would be very surprised if he took a plea agreement, just because I don't think there's anything to be gained there. And I think he's going to draw this out as long as he possibly can. But the other thing we're still waiting on is more autopsy results. And I started this video talking about Casey Anthony, and so let me explain how I'm getting there. Water is the most corrosive substance on the planet when it comes to evidence. Okay, which is why Wayne Williams and Gary Ridgway were able to deter detection for so long. Water washes away evidence, it corrodes evidence, it contaminates evidence. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things working against him in this trial, or where we stand right now. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of things working for him. And my hope is that the prosecutors don't get so blinded to what should be obvious to everybody and go with what they can prove. And I think if they lay it out appropriately, I think if they take their time, really build a case, and are really diligent with the forensics, and I'm really hoping that Audrii fought back and I'm hoping that she's got some kind of DNA on her that can't be explained. The defense can't just go, oh, well, we don't know how that got there. You know, it leaves very little room for doubt, but I want to see the right person held accountable for what happened to Audrii. And I want to make sure that there's no way for him to worm his way out and beat this on a 1 in a billion technicality. It happens, and it's unfortunate. It shouldn't happen, but unfortunately it does. And so going forward, it's going to be interesting to see how this case develops. And I really think that he'll push for a trial, just because it's a chance for him to relive all that. And just from what I see briefly here, I think that's totally within the realm of possibility. I would like to get more information about him, know a little bit more about him and his past and his background. I'm also hoping that when he was booked in, you see, in Texas, you can, if somebody's arrested for a serious offense, and that's how it's worded, you can take a DNA swab from them. And you're basically left to your discretion or your department's discretion about what they consider a serious offense. And so I'm hoping they've taken DNA. I'm hoping they've got good photographs. And I'm really hoping there's a scratch, there's a bite mark, there's something that connects the two, and connects him so securely that all that circumstantial evidence becomes direct evidence, and that leads to him being sentenced. Y'all, thank you so much for watching Cowboy Criminology, for your comments, for your shares, for your views, for your subscriptions. Y'all, thank you. Please like, share this video on your favorite social media. And I enjoy making these videos. I got to say, it was really nice watching this channel grow. But you know, as much time as Cowboy Criminology focuses on crime, I also want to focus on the victims. And let's not forget, every crime has a victim. Okay, and so let's be sure that while we're trying to increase our knowledge about the crime, let's also keep the victim and their family and friends with us as the reason that we do this. All right, y'all, have a fantastic weekend. Take care of yourselves. I have a new video coming out at the beginning of the week.